Welcome back. This is the first panel session of the day. So this is Route to Net Zero, setting decarbonisation targets and managing climate risks and opportunities. Here to moderate the panel is Pranoy Chowdhury. He's a senior consultant from the Carbon Trust team based here in Southeast Asia. Pranoy, welcome. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Ralph, for the introduction, and a very good afternoon to all the attendees of this webinar. In this session, we will hear more from our esteemed panelists from the corporates in Southeast Asia and how they have started their decarbonization journey and the practical challenges and the opportunities on the journey towards net zero. Just to provide a bit of context, Singapore and Southeast Asia are highly vulnerable to the effects of climate change. Climate change has been ranked among the top security concerns for the past few years in Southeast Asia. Despite this, the region has witnessed one of the highest increase in the greenhouse gases emissions. Just to add to that, 19 of the 25 cities most exposed to the 1 meter sea level rise are in Asia. Net zero is not a passing trend. It is a crucial lever for driving urgently needed ambitious climate action. Net zero has the potential to limit temperature rise below 1.5 degrees centigrade, and that is done by pursuing greater efforts of mitigation and physically reducing CO2 out of the atmosphere. The widespread global adoption of net zero targets from countries to companies is a part of long-term shift to a decarbonized economies in response to the climate emergency. Just a gentle reminder to all the attendees, we have got 2 polls coming to you during this panel session. Also, if you have any questions for the panelists, please put your questions in the chat box. We will take some of the questions from the audiences towards the end of the session. Now, without further ado, let me introduce our wonderful panelists to the session. First, we have Corina Schuller. Corina is the Sustainability and Corporate Communications Director at Econo Retail. Econo Retail is the owner of IKEA home furnishing business in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, the Philippines, Vietnam, and Mexico. Corina spent more than a decade in journalism before joining Econo in 2013 to start up the internal and corporate communications team. Next, we have Adeline Anthony Senior. Adeline is the head of sustainability at Axiata Group Malaysia. Adeline has more than 20 years of experience in operations, consulting, and corporate planning. Her area of expertise focuses on environmental management and sustainability. She established GHG emissions inventories, sustainability strategies, and frameworks throughout her career and led the verification of non-financial data as well. Next in line, we have Serena Tho. Serena is the General Manager of Group Sustainability at Keppel Corporation. Serena, together with the group sustainability team, sets and monitors the carbon emission reduction targets across the group activities in the area of energy and environment, urban development, connectivity, and asset management. Keppel Corporation is one of Singapore's flagship multi-business companies. It has put sustainability at the core of its strategy by providing solutions which contribute to sustainable development and combating climate change. Last but not the least, we have Sebastian Bond. Sebastian heads procurement of Dynapack Asia Group since 2017. He also leads the group sustainability strategy and action since 2018. He previously worked for more than 10 years at two large FMCG companies, which is Procter & Gamble and Unilever, sourcing raw materials and packaging for their multiple products in Europe, Middle East and Africa, as well as Southeast Asia and Australasia. I would like to welcome all our panelists and thank them for joining this panel. So now maybe I can start with the very first question to all the panelists. Why is it so important and urgent for corporates to set ambitious climate targets towards net zero by 2050 and with interim targets for 2030? So maybe I can go first with Corina.
I think why is it so important? The urgency, actually, we don't need to look further than yesterday's news to see the urgency with the snow disappearing on the slopes of France and with the streets of Los Angeles flooded. And, you know, climate change is just a current and present danger now. It's not something that only the scientists are talking about. Our own coworkers are feeling it now. We were recently putting the sandbags up at our IKEA store in Bangkok because we were facing flooding there. So, and as you noted, all of the markets where I work, where I represent IKEA, are all in the global south, and all of our markets are considered at serious, and in the case of the Philippines, extreme risk from climate change. So, of course, it's very important for companies to get on top of this now. I think as our customers and our coworkers feel the impacts of climate change, they will be demanding more and more that companies show what they are doing to contribute to carbon reductions and what they are doing in terms of sustainability. So I think it's critical that companies have a plan. And then a plan for 2050. I'll be long retired by 2050. I hope I'll have grandchildren by then. But of course, we need to set targets here and now for what's happening, next year, never mind 2030. I think we need to have a plan for year by year how we're going to grow and develop the sustainability agenda and reduce our carbon emissions. That new corporate net zero standard that came out, that's the science-based target, is asking us for a 50% reduction by 2030. And, that just blows my mind. I don't know how we're going to get to a 50% reduction by 2030. But we're starting now with the feasibility study to take a look at each piece of our carbon footprint and how can we tackle it year on year. And then we'll see where we can get by 2030. But it's certainly important to set those targets for the near future before we start to think about 2050 and net zero, which is an absolute imperative, of course.
Great, Corina. I totally agree with you. I mean, climate change is so real that we have started to see the impact in our day-to-day lives as well. As you mentioned about your, co-workers, they are experiencing those climate change impact. And totally agree. This is a big task, and not just maybe for our lives, but for the next generation as well, if we want to keep our planet as it is today. Next, maybe Adeline, if you can share your thoughts on this. Why is it important and urgent for corporate to start their net zero journey now?
Yeah, so I think the narrative that you normally hear, when we started this journey is that, the runway is short. If you look at it, from a perspective between now to 2030, if you look at it from a business planning cycle, it's maybe two and a half, cycles for you to start planning in terms of what you need to do. So it's definitely something that, everyone has to play a part, as corporates as well together. So maybe just a bit of background. Axiata is actually a telco company, also a technology company. So for us, it's really about embracing this opportunity to drive innovation and to also see how we can, through the enablement effect, also help society as well as the environment to be more, to really through all these good telecommunications, good connectivity, to be more efficient and to optimize the outputs in everything that we do.
Exactly, Adeline. I mean, the point that you mentioned about the innovation, which climate change is bringing to the organization, is so important. It not just helps the climate, but actually helps the business itself by bringing, reducing the resources cost, and it can bring more profitability to the business as well. So it's not just about doing good, but it brings a lot of good to the business as well. Mm-hmm. All right. So next we have Serena. Serena, if you want to share your thoughts on this.
And hi, sorry, I had difficulty unmuting just now. Now, basically, I agreed with what both Corina and Adeline said. For us, we are already in some of the businesses, waste to energy, district cooling, and so on, which uses a lot of energy, but at the same time has a lot of potential to actually help our customers to bring down their emissions as well. So the think about it is to actually look at it and reinvent and improve, and essentially make it mutually beneficial for both our customers and ourselves. So you look for solutions to bring down your emissions. You also are, because of the scope 1, 2, and 3 framework and all that, you are also helping to bring down the emissions of your customers as well. So it is basically a virtuous cycle. There are challenges, but also tremendous opportunities. So as a conglomerate, in various segments of the business, we are already very much committed to doing good in this area already. So essentially, we're looking at new business areas, new ways of improving, both for our customers as well as for ourselves.
Great. So that's the trend that we as a consultant are seeing as well. Like organizations are looking beyond their own emissions, which is scope 1 and 2. They are planning to have scope 4, or we call it scope 3 plus, or we call it enablement avoided carbon emissions as well, which they are able to bring, the decarbonization that they are able to bring to their customers as well. Right. So now how about Sebastian? Maybe you want to share about, the urgency and the importance of becoming net zero by 2050 and then setting interim targets as well for 2030.
Yes, hi Pranoy, hi everyone. Glad to connect here. So maybe a bit of background, Dynapack, maybe less famous than IKEA. So we are a plastic manufacturer company, over 6 countries in Southeast Asia with 6,300 employees and 28 factories. And we produce plastic products, packaging, and components. So I think for us, the urgency really came up in 2018 when plastic, was making the news, and plastic pollution is very concerning to us. And we wanted all products to have the lowest environmental impact and for sure not end up in oceans or landfills. And this is where we started to, realize and understand more about the climate change challenge and how we need to, as a company, participate and aim for these very challenging ambitions to have neutral emissions. So for us, modestly, the first step was more on CDP, just calculating our emissions, knowing what our products were emitting when we produce them. I think we've done good progress to move from C to B minus and now B on CDP rating. We just signed up for SBTi and we'll finalize the targets for SBTi later this year. So that means for 2030 we have a very clear path, being defined. Now we have these ambitions for 2050. No clear, signature on it yet, but we for sure want, and I think any business should make sure the products or the consequence of doing, the business we have is environmentally neutral. And for sure there are many challenges to this. Happy to share a bit of our experience here.
I could maybe just jump onto that. I think a point that was missed before, when you're talking CDP, you're talking climate disclosure rating, right? It's a measure of transparency. And for us today, that remains optional where I'm located right now. But coming 2026 for us, because of the EU climate disclosure requirements that are coming down, because we are owned ultimately by an entity in Europe, we will be subject to that. So it will be an actual legal requirement for us to measure our climate footprint and to show our progress year after year. So that's also part of the urgency. Right now, I feel myself, I'm a little bit like in the practice run. I'm just learning how to take our climate footprint, how to set those science-based targets and so on. But I know that coming in the future, this will be a requirement. So that's why I'm already getting going now with my climate reporting and so on to see how I can do that in the best way.
Right. Thank you, Sebastian and Corinna. It's good to see, Dynapack taking a lot of, ambitious steps, committing to science-based target and reducing their emissions by 2030. All right, so this is the time for the polls. So I think we asked a poll question to our audience. Maybe we can have a look at the result. So the question that we asked to the audiences was, is your organization working on a business climate strategy? The options given were, no, we haven't started. No, we have implemented, but they have implemented carbon reduction initiatives. And yes, they have a business climate strategy and they know their carbon footprint and the material emission sources. Next option was, yes, they have a business climate strategy and they have a good understanding of the climate related risk and opportunities for their business. And the last option was, yes, they have already committed to a science-based carbon reduction targets and implementing carbon reduction initiative. So if we look at the results, 36% have said, yes, we have already committed and have set a science-based target initiative. This is really, really good to see. Like most of them have already kind of pretty advanced in their climate business strategies. I'm assuming that means they have already done their scope 1, 2, and 3 footprint. They have already kind of identified what are the risks and opportunities as well. But I also see 22% they have not yet started. So hopefully after this session, our panelists will, what they have done will encourage you to take more actions or starting your journey towards the net zero. So maybe something very related to this poll question, maybe if I can have my next question, which is, what are the challenges and opportunities faced in creating a successful business climate strategy, and how to successfully overcome the challenges or capitalize on the opportunities? So maybe I'll go with Adeline, if you'd like to take that question.
Yes. So I think, when I earlier on when I said, this is really a journey, it is something that you have to get buy-in. So we signed up to the SBTI in 2021, and this year in September, we are supposed to go in for our validation. So I think there are two parts to it. Number one is really the buy-in from the board, especially, the top management need to understand. And to get that buy-in, they also need to see the data. They need to understand where are the emission sources coming from, and really from a high level, what are some of the mitigation or measures that can be put in place. So I think it starts with that. Otherwise, it's quite difficult to get the management's buy-in because they would really like to understand where we are. The next bit was, the minute we signed our SBTI, and when it came out in the press, the next question was really, okay, so what are you doing now that you've signed up the SBTI? So in a way, you are also forced to start developing your net zero carbon roadmap. So that was also something that we worked on last year. And before we could share it, we also need to get internal buy-in. So it was very interesting, when we started developing that roadmap. With that roadmap, when we had the internal discussions, with different departments, with procurement, with people, with technology, when there was a roadmap, everybody started seeing, okay, this is where you want to get to, this is where I can contribute. So it is really important to have that roadmap because it spurred a lot of conversation internally, cross-functionally, and everyone started saying, okay, this is something that maybe I can do. Is this something that I should be looking at for? So I think those are the very two important elements that you need to have. And once you have that, once you have a plan, once you have something which is clear coming from the group, then you see so we have operating companies as well, operating outside of Malaysia. It is easier to get them on board. So that's just a bit of the sharing, initially how we started our journey and, how do we get the momentum going.
Thank you, Adeline. The point you made about, getting the buy-in from the board and the top management is so crucial in starting the journey. Next, Serena, if you would like to share on this, more thoughts on this.
Yeah. Buy-in is very important, and right from the top, management buy-in from the board, from our staff as well. But I think the question that you mentioned earlier was about challenges also. So in Singapore, I think Singapore-based companies will face the same challenges, the lack of renewable energy. So it's very difficult to buy racks here because demand is much greater than supply. So we are in the business of trying to import renewable energy. One case in point was that we actually brought in successfully from Laos renewable energy, and we're working at exploring imports of hydrogen with various parties as well. So that's one of the challenges that is both a challenge but also a business opportunity for us as well. And the other thing is we are looking at apart from renewables, development of a hydrogen-ready power plant as well, and new technologies and carbon capture also. Yeah. So this is the portion that I think we should actually look at it very positively, because it's not just that there are a lot of challenges and so on, but tremendous opportunities that come with it as well. Yeah.
Absolutely, Serena. I totally agree. Technology and innovation has got to play a major role in our journey towards net zero. And I'm sure, Corina might be facing similar challenges and opportunities. So Corina, if you would like to share more on that.
I think the biggest challenge when you look at your climate footprint all in full is that so many pieces of it feel so beyond your control. 50% of our climate footprint comes from the products we sell, from the material raw extraction, the production in factories far away from here. And we don't control that. We simply buy those products. Then there's 20% relates to customer travel. We had 1.5 million visitors to our stores and centers last year alone, and their emissions count on our climate footprint. Another 7% relates to local food ingredients that we buy. So I feel that the further away it feels for me, the more hopeless I feel a little bit. But that's where I see the point of a Scope 3 map, is that it really drives radical collaboration, which is what we all need to do ultimately to get to net zero. We really need to work within our supply chain. So I have, of course, picked up the phone and spoken to our franchisor and asked about the materials agenda, and they are really on it. They have an ambition by 2030 to have 100% renewable and recycled materials in our 100% of IKEA products, which is a very tough ambition. But they are working on the materials agenda. And in our business now, we took a whole conversation on, okay, what could we do to try and encourage more customers to take buses or to make the transition to EV? So we're talking about every place where we offer parking, we will have EV charging. Every place where we have a store, we will be talking about bus routes and connectivity, which we've done already for a long time, but we're looking at how can we improve that. And we offer some free shuttle services, as we do here in Singapore and in other places. So we're really, it's driving creative thinking. And it's driving us in a new way. So I think that is a challenge and an opportunity. But I also hear you, Serena, on the commercial opportunity. I think that as our customers become more and more impacted by climate change, they will be looking more and more to reward companies that they regard as sustainable. And they will be looking for products that they feel were made in a sustainable and responsible way, and products that enable a sustainable life at home. And that's where, we can talk about our LED bulbs, and we're certainly not the only place to sell LED bulbs, but we offer them at the lowest price in the market, or that's at least our ambition every time. So we are, if you come to our store today, you'll see that we have a whole string, we call it the green thread of communication around products that enable sustainable life at home, just to inspire people and to inform them about recycling and reducing waste in their kitchen and growing at home and saving on electricity. So I see those as commercial opportunities for even a company like IKEA.
Yeah, just to add on, it also happens in real estate, for instance. Like when we green our buildings, we effectively are actually helping our tenants to achieve their own LEEDs, platinum, and so on, So it's not just spending money greening our own operations, but enabling our customers and all that to be able to, our tenants, to be able to step up and actually achieve their targets as well. So, we look at it in, it's basically a huge opportunity for us, as from our traditional business, reinventing it, greening it, and building new business lines out of it.
Great.
Yeah, I'd like to bounce also on the customer reward part, that I think if customers can really reward, or consumer also, when you buy a product every day as an individual or customer, when you decide contracts to source from suppliers for the next 6 months, a year, I think this is where this can make a difference in coming years. Today, I think for Dynapack, that is a challenge. I do believe we do significantly more than local producers of plastic products, but there's no real reward that we do better on either carbon emissions or using recycled materials. So I think that customer reward or consumer reward will be a topic which definitely can drive progress in the coming years.
Great. Thank you very much. I think one point is very, very clear. I mean, the pressure is coming from the stakeholders for the businesses. For you or maybe it's your consumers who are actually expecting more and more sustainability in your products and services that you're providing to them. But there are other stakeholders like investors and maybe government institutions who are looking at the corporates on how they are performing in terms of sustainability within their own business as well. So thank you very much for that. And now this is the time for the next poll question. And the next poll question that we asked to the audience was, which of the following frameworks has your organization utilized or is utilizing till date? Because there are so many frameworks and people might be confused. So some of them are like GHG Protocol, Science-Based Target Initiative, TCFD, which is the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. Then we have CDP, and then like maybe if no one knows about those. So let's see the results. So as per the result, the highest is GHG protocol as expected because that is where everyone starts at. And the next one is more on the none. So that is a bit surprising as well. That means a lot of corporates haven't even started. So maybe at this point, I'd like to make a question to our panelists, like how businesses can utilize these international frameworks like SBTI, TCFD to supplement their climate strategy, and what are the benefits of utilizing these international frameworks. So maybe Sebastian, if you would like to answer that question.
Sure. I mean, for us, simply, CDP was originally, I think, customer request back in 2015, and we started with Indonesia. So Indonesia is where the group originated, and we have more or less half of our business there. But yeah, I would say even just CDP, which sounds basic today, I think for us was quite a journey to move from calculating properly emissions for Indonesia, then for Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, Singapore, and then China factories. So I think the questions CDP has definitely, the first time you look at them and you try to answer them, for sure challenged us to realize that actually we do not have so many of these processes or policies or even strategy that are being asked. And this is how we also then move to more the GHG protocol to be used in order to structure part of our data collections and calculations. Now we've signed up for SBTI, and I think this year we'll discover more details on the science-based target and what we need to ensure to fully sign off this our ambition on SBTI for 2030.
Thank you, Sebastian. Adeline, maybe your thoughts on this as well?
Yeah, so I think it is really a bit of a progression. You start with the greenhouse gas protocol, essentially to make sure that, when you are capturing your numbers, your scope 1, 2, and 3, you are following a certain standard, because when you report, you also need to be, reporting apple to apple. And then next, by signing on to the SBTI, it's good because you kind of like, you drive a bigger ambition. Instead of just coming up with, year on year, 2%, 3% reduction, signing up to SBTI or net zero means you need to think big. You really need to look at the way you do business in a completely different manner. If you're going to sign up to SBTI and still intend to do business the same way you're doing, then it's not going to happen. All right. And then as you progress, when you start building the roadmap, then, like you said, you start seeing the challenges. You start seeing how important it is to collaborate, within your sector, outside your sector. There would be some areas where your roadblock would be policies, because, policies don't enable you to do, like in Malaysia, certain things you still can't build a solar farm. And then this is where you go into the area of advocacy. So it's only when you have this kind of big ambitions, you are driven to, start thinking a bit outside the box in terms of what more you can do. And we also started on our TCFD journey, which is great because I think the elephant in the room when you talk about moving towards net zero is really capex. It is not cheap. It costs a lot of money, and you do need to see, or you do need to prioritize where is it do you want to put your funds, and which can give you optimum benefits from a business perspective, as well as for the environment and for the people and for the places where you operate in. So that's where the outcomes from the TCFD scenario analysis and all also helps us to really see where do you want to put your money, or where do you want to put more effort in as you journey through, to meet your net zero ambition. And I think the other really important bit is also pacing yourself. You don't want to do things too early, neither do you want to do things too late. So it's really about, when do you want to pace, at what point to adopt what technology. It's also about understanding how is regulations going to change. It's also about understanding your grid emission factors. What do you anticipate to see in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years? So that's where when you follow all these standards, it also guides your thinking process, and it helps you to progress in a systematic way as you journey through, to reach your net zero ambition.
Maybe I'll jump in here.
Yep,
I think
sure.
the frameworks actually, because as, this whole area is so wide, the frameworks actually give you a way of bucketing your different aspects. And like Adeline said, we can't focus on everything all at once. So if you look at E, S, and G, or you look at qualitative or quantitative, then that's where you look at what's my prioritization. Back to also Adeline said something about investments as well. Yes, you have to decide what are you going to invest in, whether it is a product or a technology, and also basically even for the reporting portion of it. I mean, in Asia, most of us use GRI, but we also know ISSB is also coming as well. So it's investing the resources to look into those areas as well. And then you have TCFD. TCFD, you can start off with the qualitative aspects, but you will move into matrix, which is quantitative. And once you go into quantitative, you start with a spreadsheet, but soon the spreadsheet may not be adequate and you have to get a system. So these are all the decisions that have to come, and we actually have to pace ourselves, like also what Adeline mentioned. So you have scope 1 and 2, fairly simple because it's basically diesel, LNG, and then after that electricity. But once you come to scope 3, there are 15 different categories. And again, you can't cover all 15 all at once. You got to look at which one is relevant to you as well. So it's a whole gamut of things. But back to like CDP, which Sebastian mentioned, CDP is very well recognized, and it serves as a way of looking at different companies. It's a benchmark is also linked to TCFD, SBTI. So it's a good way of screening which are the good companies, right? And basically some are like A-listers, B, and then B, C, and then we are a respectable B, and we can say that it actually takes a lot of effort to be a B, because it is a lot of work that's involved. You have to have metrics, right? And essentially collecting data is always a challenge with every organization. Yeah.
Good. So Serena, you mentioned about achieving B is a challenging task, but hearing that, I think Sebastian will be very happy to hear, because they have achieved the B certification in CDP. And I mean, I totally agree with you. I mean, on these, frameworks, from like consultants' point of view, all these frameworks give like a consistency basically. So when we are working with the client, we ensure we have the same yardstick of calculations, or comparing them against the target settings and footprinting. We have the same, so there's a consistency across the different companies. So that's what I mean from the consultancy point of view, I'll say. All right, so we are here at the end of our panel discussion. I mean, just the Q&A. So we'd like to bring our Q&A from the audiences as well. So I can see audiences have already put some of the Q&As in the chat box. But if we can have a look at the top voted question. Or maybe I can share the question which I see over here, which is, can the presenters share concrete actions and strategies that they will be implementing in the coming weeks and months? So I understand maybe, I mean, IKEA is taking some concrete actions in Malaysia. So Koina, if you would like to share those.
I mean, we're taking it in every country, but okay, if I speak in Malaysia, I just came out of a meeting at 1 hour ago where we talked about throwing our hat in the ring for the new green power program that the government has announced there. And we're looking at building a solar farm together with a vendor who will build a solar farm on behalf of IKEA and then supply us through the grid that energy. And that would help us get to 43% of our total energy consumption. That includes huge shopping centers and 4 large IKEA stores. So that's a low-hanging fruit for us to just take care of the electricity consumption through solar. We are maximizing what we can do on our own rooftops as well. We have solar on every store and a big expansion underway with our store in Kuala Lumpur right now. So that's the low-hanging fruit. Then the other more challenging one that we've talked about in every market, but especially challenging maybe in Malaysia is our most challenged market. We're talking about how can we push the sales of plant-based foods. We've taken a look at our footprint from food. We run some of the biggest restaurants in the world. We have millions of customers every year in our IKEA restaurants. And we know the difference between the footprint from our famous Swedish meatball and our new plant-based ball. So the plant ball is coming to Malaysia next year or this year in May. And we're talking about, how can we go really big, loud, and get excited about that and motivate people to give it a try and explain to people what is the difference between red meat and plant-based food for your planet as well as for your plate. So I think practically speaking also, I just came home from Malaysia where I've been in a business planning session and we got 50 leaders, all our store managers, all our management teams together, and we showed them our carbon footprint and we challenged them, what are your ideas? What can we do about this? So I think that educating your coworkers and especially your leaders is a really important first step, and to generate excitement for this agenda and to explain the basics of climate change, start the story from the very beginning. Do not assume that people know all these things we're talking about, like everybody knows SPTI and TCFD. I think we really need to bring the story down to a way that the many people can really understand and bring them along on the journey. And that includes like our coworker on the shop floor and the chairman of our board.
Absolutely, Corina. Sustainability is, every employee of the corporate is responsible for sustainability, right from, the people working, hands-on workers, to the right at the board and management as well. But maybe, on the same question, if anyone else would like to share, what are the, immediate steps that you are taking in your journey towards, decarbonization? If anyone else would like
maybe
to
I'll contribute a bit here. We've worked very hard to bring in renewables because basically that is really one of the challenges that the whole country faces, the lack of renewables, right? Then the other things in terms of practical things for us as a company, we're also looking at our carbon avoidance, what they call Scope 4. So what we are actually helping the customer save in terms of the emissions as well. So last year we started reporting waste to energy. So we're going to expand it to other assets and look at how much our products, waste to energy, district cooling, and we'll go down the list and push our products to be better so that our customers will also benefit by having lower emissions as well.
Great.
And
Thank you, Serena.
also expanding, basically looking at the supply chain as well, because under Scope 3, purchase goods and services is also going to be very high in terms of the emissions as well. And then also look at what we have as our investments. So we also have shadow carbon pricing, which we are looking at taking a review of it to see what can be improved. So basically the shadow carbon price will basically force our investment managers to think about what is the price of carbon when I invest in this project, and it's putting that price of carbon into the return on investment and the internal rate of return.
Great. You brought an excellent point on the internal carbon pricing, which more and more corporates are using nowadays to make the investment decision and also the assets that they are currently holding on to. So maybe at this point, I'll take another top question from the audiences, which is, how do we make sure that by signing up for the commitments today's leader on not kicking the can down the road. After all, many of these are mid to long-term commitments, and perhaps the technologies needed to actually get there are not even available today. So anyone would like to answer this question?
Well, yeah, if I can, Pranoy, then I think for us, at management level, it was quite easy to have a buy-in of signing commitment, maybe because a smaller company and top management was convinced already. So now for the challenge is more almost engaging employees and making sure that to drive progress, we need a lot of actions at all levels. Now, I think this is, even if at top management level, you have a vision, we don't know indeed how we will do our 50% reduction by 2030. I think today, solar panels for us was, the easiest. I mean, it's not easy because there's a lot of things to do on our buildings, but still the easiest to do. And this will mean 9-10% of energy, which can be, or electricity, which can be then carbon free. We probably have energy project reductions for another 10%, but that means we have 30% of the reductions we don't know today where it will come from. I think, as Corina said, markets are changing. Malaysia in this opening, the possibility of having solar farms. I'm convinced, down the road in 2025 or 2028, there will be more solutions for electricity, but also for everything else which are generating emissions. So one thing which we haven't talked yet is, and which is big for us as a plastic manufacturer, is the use on recycled materials. We know that using recycled plastic is 30 to 50% lower carbon emissions on the life cycle analysis. And obviously this will also be part of our efforts by 2030 to make sure we have a lower total footprint. And I think this is not only on plastic. I think the circular economy theme, whether it's aluminium, metals in general, paper, plastic, and others, is a thing that everyone should explore as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sebastian. I mean, anyone else wants to? Yeah, Adeline.
Yeah, I'll add on.
I think
sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I just wanted to say that I do worry that the setting a target alone could become a form of greenwashing, because if you're not around in 2030 or in 2050, it's easy to say now, oh, I'm an SBTI company, I've set a target. The roadmap is the thing, and that's why I think those interim targets, like, it's not just 2030. It's like, what is your roadmap to get to 2030? What are you actually doing to get to 2030? And those questions are mind-blowing. It is really hard to imagine how you're going to get to 2030 when I look at my footprint. And I think it's good. And I want to be that, like, ruthless optimist. That's what we're saying at IKEA. We have to be optimistic in the midst of these scary times. But optimism with a plan. Optimism can't be just like, I hope they'll come along with a big carbon emission sucking machine. We need to have a real concrete plan for how we can address it. And so, yeah, I just think that the targets are one thing, and then don't let the targets be it alone. It's that map to get there. So I think we should measure what we do and achieve every single year, and that's why I think the disclosure and the hyper transparency is really important, because it keeps all of us on our toes and keeps all of us moving forward on the agenda, raises the awareness, and drives that really radical collaboration that we need to see now to make this a reality.
Great. Thank you very much, Corina, for highlighting that we are not alone. I mean, corporates are not alone in this journey. Entire ecosystem is working towards getting net zero, like from governments. They are decarbonizing the grids. Everyone, suppliers, consumers, everyone is together and working towards the decarbonization goal, immediate as well as from medium to longer term. I think we almost have are at the end of the session. So apologies if some of your questions were not answered in this session, but I would like to thank all our panelists for really a wonderful session. Hopefully a lot of our audiences would have got inspiration, and they will kind of set emissions target and then work on their organization to reduce their emissions as well, to keep our global temperature rise below 1.5 degrees centigrade. So thank you very much, everyone.